happens. Yeah, my name is Simon Peter Bayingana. I come from Uganda. Uganda is in the Eastern Africa, and it's also part of the Global South. And I am an activist and trainer in movement building, in community organizing, and also in civil resistance tactics and strategies. I am also part of a movement called the Solidarity 2020 and Beyond, a movement that is which is highly supported by NVI through fiscal sponsorship. And we have a network called the Global Grassroots Network that brings across activists in all parts of Africa to come together, to share knowledge, to discuss, and to also build their network. It's a network where I got to learn NVI when I was invited to be part of a webinar that was launching the Checklist to End Tyranny, a book that was authored by the late, and may his soul rest in peace, Dr. Peter Ackman. So that was the beginning of my engagement with this great group. And up to now, we're moving together. But I think our engagement and our relationship has actually been built and up to today because of the love and passion of what we all do. And because we want to see change, we want to see people rising up. We want to see that power is back to the people, and also we want to see that justice prevails over the injustices that are happening. So it's really a pleasure to be part of this call, and I also belong to the RISE team. RISE, it's called the RISE Global Coaching Fellowship. It's a fellowship that brings together young activists who come for a fellowship of 6 months, basically to learn more about movement building, and it's convened by an organization, RISE, that is based in New York. So it's always a pleasure to come on these spaces and share. Before I go into grassroots movement organizing, I also want to thank and also acknowledge the material that we've gathered and we've got from NVI. Me and my team, the students movement that we are working with, we are trying to see how we can use the book of Michael Beer of civil resistance actions and tactics in the 21st century. And our idea is that we are kind of getting all these tactics and kind of putting them in visuals and sharing them in communities so that we see what works and what we can really use in our context. Because in Uganda, as I will tell you in future about grassroots organizing in such an area, is that many of us always think about doing the same old stuff. Like I should tell you, like when we're talking about protest, we think about a street march, we think about presenting a petition, we think about, you know, like a sit-in. These are like the same old kind of tactics that we are employing. And in the long run, we've realized that many of them have become like the old stuff and without any impact at all. At one point, we thought that they are the safest tactics to use, but we realize even when marches happen, people are arrested and later you do not even achieve your results. So this book comes in as kind of like a new breed, a new area of thinking to help us to think about the different tactics that we are put up and then see how we can employ them in our context. Later, as we engage, I think during your internship, I'll also be able to share some of our findings from this project that we have encountered on of using the book of Michael Beer to see how some of these new tactics that he has developed and learned from some other spaces and how they can be employed here. So I just wanted to bring that to also to you guys. Well, I personally love reading, and I'm trying to read the book of Jonathan. I think Nonviolence International always brings us new knowledge to think about the new trends of organizing, the new trends of how to employ civil resistance, the new trends of kind of coming together as a society, building collective power to see that we can achieve the success that we want. So thank you very much. I just wanted to bring that up before I go into my session of grassroots organizing and activism, but I feel that was worth, and I must tell you the interns that you're with the right people that are going to give you the new knowledge that if you love organizing, if you love civil resistance, if you love organizing in your communities, you are in the right space to help you do this. So good. So this is my presentation today as I meet the NVI interns. Now, when we talk about organizing in my own sense, like even practically in what I've done in this region, even like in the field, I would basically, what comes in my mind is the leadership. Organizing is the leadership that enables people to turn the resources that they have into the power that they need to make the change they want. So organizing is more or less like leadership. When people come together and realize they know that, you know, we've come together, we are a resource, we have different skills that we bring on table. How do we turn these resources that we have into the power? And that's what we call building power, building people power, and then in order to make the change that we want. In organizing, we are looking at bringing people together to achieve a collective goal, a collective cause, be it a movement and all that. Now, when we go basically into leadership, there's a lot of definition in leadership, but the leadership now we are talking about in organizing is accepting the responsibility for enabling others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. And practically, I should tell you that there are so many people out there who do not care about society. They do not care how politics is run in their countries. They do not care how things are done, because basically they are frustrated, or they have other interests in life, or I mean, it's not part of their business. So long as they eat, they have like whatever they need, they do not care about others. But we organizers and activists always take this as leadership because no one is paying this for us, but it's a passion that we have. We accept to take this responsibility to enable, like we say a lot of things like we want to be the voice of the voiceless. Like in the context like Uganda, you realize that there are so many activists who do work and they are arrested. And when you ask them questions like, why do you go into this? I mean, are you the one suffering? Why? They'll tell you reasons that because I love it, because I want to see my society change. I want to see my kids have a better life. I want to see the next generations to live in a society that will be just for them. So they have accepted this leadership and no one has appointed them. No one has elected them. They come up and they are enabling others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. So basically, we are looking at three things in achieving this. We are looking at planning. In planning, exactly, we want to say, what do we want to achieve? At the end of the goal, at the end of a movement, or we come together as a movement, what do we want to achieve? Some of us think right now that we want to achieve change in our country. We want to see that we're in a country where the leaders are controlling everything. They control all the sectors, the elections, and we've lost hope in elections. Yeah, they are controlling the judiciary. We've lost hope in the judiciary because that's not where we can get justice. So we're looking at what we want to achieve, and that entails with the planning. The implementation is basically how are we doing it? How are we going to achieve it? And in organization, what do we need? And these are like the resources and all those bits. So practically, we look at these three kind of points because we want to have a positive impact. We want to achieve the shared goal that we want to achieve. As leaders, as organizers, we want to see that we have a positive kind of impact that we get in our society. And in our organizing, basically, even in the minimum organizing of 2 people, communication is always key for us. Coordination. Now, when direct communication is enforced, there is going to be coordination. And because of coordination, we are going to develop trust. I should tell you that societies, in our movements that we work in, we face a challenge of trust. And no one is going to teach us trust. Trust is basically behavior observation. When I call you today for a meeting and you do not appear, and I call you the second day, you appear late, the third day, you're not there. I mean, I am not going to trust you because I don't see my communication working. I don't see that we are coordinating. And that is what happens in movements. Like in the student movement that I'm working with, I mean, you see people coming up each and every day for meetings. But when you communicate sometimes about an action or an activity, you see 2 people coming. And when you go back to the drawing board, you realize that there is no trust. So trust is built over a long period of time, and this is through constant communication, coordination, and trust. And without trust in a movement, even with the leaders, things are not going to be easy to achieve. I must tell you that. That's why we have issues where, like in our movements in a country like Uganda, you'll see that there is a lot of mistrust because we believe that many people are moles, many people are planted, provocateurs in our movement. They're here to extract information and maybe share it with other people. And this has really been a challenge. So trust is an important issue, and it's one way that has helped us to see that how do we build it? And we have built it over the time through 2 things, through communication, through coordination, and we have been able to achieve that. Movements like ours, grassroots organizations like ours, we face, this challenge that some people feel that we are like NGOs, like someone opens up an organization and feel, wow, this is like an NGO. But I must tell you that we in grassroots movements, we are very, very distinct in even our character. Like in a mainstream organization, let's say like Action Aid, like those big organizations, they need money to organize. They need money to do activities. But for us, like we need people and time. And this is our best resource that we have looked at over and over the time. We don't have money to recruit professionals like in mainstream organization, but we look at volunteers like the interns, like you, like others who come together and say, wow, I'll do this. I'll offer my skills to do the administrative work. I offer my skills to plant the placards in areas, to draw the placards, to I mean, put posters around the areas in when we're doing an action. And like, because we build on the spirit of volunteering, that's why we find it easier to mobilize. We find it easier to see that things are done, because our conviction is to see that things are done, and our motivation is not relied on like monetary gain or material gain. We're looking at achieving something at the end. The biggest of all is that mainstream organizations focus so much on competition, because we want a donor to see us and maybe say that, oh, well, let's give you money. We are seeing, I mean, for us, we are focusing on cooperation and coordination. And like, this is our strength as grassroots movement. I will know, like, for example, NVI would collaborate with me to be like a fiscal sponsor, to support me when I have activities. Like in the movement that I belong to, the Solidarity 2020 and beyond, the Global Grassroots Network, I mean, they are going to give you resources when you have activities to do. Like, for example, we have an action to do, like right now, we have an action to do in Uganda, and they'll support you basing on activities. So the idea is we look so much at building network, because this is how we are going to gather more resources and skills from people, right? I may not have got direct funds from NVI, but because I built an engagement with them, I'm able to get material in terms of knowledge that helps me to support my movements. Like what we are doing, what we are going to do with the tactics, the tactics in the civil resistance tactics in the 21st century. We're trying to see what works for us, and we wouldn't get to this resource or to this material in case we did not have engaged with NVI. So we're looking more at direct, I mean, mainstream look at direct communication, emails, so and whatever. For us, we're looking at indirect communication. And sometimes we have these informal meetings, pop up for a meeting and then sit in someone's house and then discuss things and then see things are done. From my experience, I've realized that informal meetings and gatherings have helped us to achieve. I've seen achieving so much when I was in this kind of meetings than like this kind of direct formal engagements, which I go to, like, for example, invited to a workshop or a meeting or somewhere. And I don't see things happening at the end of it all. Here we call them boardroom meetings, because we believe that that's where it ends. So we focus basically on quality as grassroots movement, and mainstream will focus more on, okay, we have this outreach, we have, and they're using all this for fundraising purposes. And we do not waste time in fundraising purposes, because we want to focus more on organizing and see that things are done. Now, I want to go straight to something, because whenever we talk about resources, like we've come to realize that some movements, some people, activists, think that when I talk about resources, I'm basically meaning material resource. Now, in grassroots organizing, we have a different way we look at resources. And like for us, it's basically time, people, and money. I want to ask you something. What do you see in that picture? Just anyone can say whatever. What do they see in that picture? Yes, I see someone has raised their hand. Sandy, go on, take it up.
So I see that he's utilizing what he has to draw a line.
Yep. is utilizing what he has to draw a line. A professor is utilizing what he has to draw a line. I mean, there is an interesting discussion that came up when I asked people here, and then someone said, I see a student who is not focusing on the professor who is trying to labor so much to draw a line. But of course, we're looking at the professor. So thank you very much for that. I want to tell you that, like, we've come to realize that sometimes, and this is how we work in movements, that when you lack resources, you become more resourceful. This is exactly it. Lack of resources makes you resourceful. Like, whenever your focus is so much on what you do not have, you kind of even do not think about what you have. Like, it goes back in the definition of organizing, bringing people together, yeah, to make them realize the resources they have and turning them into power so as to achieve the change they want. So ideally, you are seeing a professor who has no ruler, but he has tried to get a chair and is using it to get the light. So as grassroots movements, what we are looking at is that because we need people, we need time, we have time on our end. Now we are focusing on that we have to be more resourceful. So we think more about what we have, not about what we do not have. And that makes us resourceful. And this is it. When you lack resources, you become more kind of resourceful. Like, for example, when we're looking at like material resources, let's say we have an action and our intended activity is to do, like, for example, a TV commercial. Yeah, we have to do a TV commercial. What would be the low-cost alternative? I want to hear ideas from people. Kindly feel free to, I mean, the facilitator can guide on this, how people can contribute, but our intended activity will be to do a TV commercial. What would be our low-cost alternative? Yes.
Word of mouth.
Someone is saying word of mouth. Thank you very much. Like, tell someone about it. Inform someone who will inform someone. Yeah. Uh-huh. What of printed material? We do not have money to do printed material, flyers and posters. What would be the cost alternative for this? Yep. Yeah, so I mean, because of time, some people then choose to use social media for this. We choose to use like resources that we have, premises, office hours we cannot rent. Then we used to work like from home, work from spaces, meet all together, like for example, in a church, in a public hall, and then sit and discuss issues. If we cannot employ professional staff, then we look at like volunteers. And I must tell you that when we look at time, is that we have a lot of stuff to do, but the time is limited. So that is what keeps us moving on each and every day, because we know that the time we have is limited. So the small time we have becomes a resource to us to plan, to implement, and to organize. Like every time we're thinking about organizing people, and this is what supports us. The cycle remains. We're looking at time, people, and money. That's how we look at as movements. And like when we lack one, then I mean, it becomes a challenge. Like when we lack material resources, we're good to go because we have people and time who are devoting their time, and also we have the numbers to see that we can achieve the time we want. I want to conclude with this and then go into like a Q&A And this is something that I learned when I was doing a course in public narrative by Professor Marshall Gans with the Leading Change Network, where he said that if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Like, this was like a rabbi in the 1st century who said this. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So this is like the story of self. And then when I'm for only myself, what am I for? What am I? And this is now goes to the story of us. And then the thing is that if not now, when? And this calls for action, the story of now. So basically, that's how briefly we will organize. So after all this, like, I would want to give and like I want to stop the share and then think about things like organizing is broad, like it's a passion, yeah. And like in grassroots movements, more so in authoritarian governments like this that are restricted, is that the dictators or the people in charge kind of build fear within communities. And fear is built through arrests, when people are arrested, taken to jail, when people are kidnapped, when people are tortured, and then it becomes sensitive work. And many people fear to kind of do this. So what, and this is what the dictators or the oppressors use, is that they are planting fear in people as much as possible. And this is within this region. Like, many activists we are seeing are fleeing away from the country to go and seek exile in other countries because they are not safe here. But the question that we keep asking ourselves, if we all flee, then who will be able to change? Who will be able to support this? So we are trying to build momentum, the spirit, the resilience in people, slowly by slowly. It's work in progress. And it happens through more and more capacity building sessions, more and more inspiration kind of gatherings, and also it's built through education, sharing knowledge. So there are 3 things that have been able to adapt, and this I've read and they have defined my philosophy now, is that first is inspiration, because without inspiration, people remain idle. Second is education. When people are not educated, they may resort to means, approaches that may not be effective. People may think about violence as a method, but you're not going to defeat violence with an oppressor who has invested tons of money into this. Yeah. So education then becomes key. And lastly is that it's action. When something is not done, things remain the same. And without action, then your education may not really be so much helpful. So that has been my philosophy of organizing as a person, or is to inspire people, then educate them, train them, and then see that they do actions. However small they are, however big they are, however achievements we get through actions, we always celebrate them. And that has helped us to build the momentum. Yes, thank you very much.